Hello everyone, this is Pooka and welcome to another Pokemon TCG video here. Today we're going to take a look at a deck that I've been trying to constantly update with each new set that comes out. Some deck that has a pretty special place. I have a soft spot for this deck, and that's going to be a Flareon deck. So these Flareon decks are going to be crazy because, well, Flareon has the attack Vengeance. It does 20 plus 10 for each Pokemon in your discard pile. So that means not only do we have to discard a lot of Pokemon to use this attack pretty effectively, we need to play a lot of Pokemon. And when you need to play a lot of Pokemon, you open up a lot of different options to use, and that's what makes this kind of a deck cool. So I would say the main attacker, the kind of solid attacker that this deck revolves around is Flareon. Right? Eventually we're trying to use Vengeance just to do a big amount of damage at the end. Big amounts of damage, good against everything. Alright? So what Pokemon are we going to run alongside Flareon? Well, the first one's going to be Leafeon. This is just a pretty obvious inclusion. Energy Crush is a pretty cool attack. For 1 energy, does 20 times the amount of energy attached to all of your opponent's Pokemon. So pretty simple, pretty good. Energy Crush. Just for 1 energy, that's pretty cool, and we're also running Eevee already, so we may as well just throw in a couple Leafeon as well. There are a bunch of other evolutions you could try out, but I feel like Flareon and Leafeon are by far the best two, so we'll stick with those two for now. Now, we have plenty of other attackers to look at here. The first one's going to be Raichu. Now, this is a card that has exploded in popularity lately, mainly because of this little symbol right here. It is a lightning-type Pokemon. Popular Pokemon like Yveltal EX and Lugia EX are weak to Raichu, which means we can use Circle Circuit to knock them out in 1 hit. Does 20 damage times the number of your benched Pokemon, so if you have a full bench, that's 100 damage, times 2, that's going to knock out an Yveltal EX or a Lugia EX in 1 hit. There you go. Raichu in general is a pretty decent attacker. 100 for 2 energy, that's pretty cool. Especially when you can just attach a double colorless and just do it for 1 energy. So Circle Circuit, Raichu is partner number 1. You're going to find Raichu in a lot of decks, especially one like this. Without Raichu, we're going to get run over by those cards like Yveltal EX and Lugia EX. There's just no way around it. Our third partner for the deck is going to be Drifblim. Drifblim has this kind of unique attack, Shadow Steel, does 50 damage times the number of special energy cards in your opponent's discard pile. So this is particularly good against things that heavily rely on special energy, obviously. I mean, a lot of decks really do rely on those special energy, whether it's double colorless, plasma decks have those plasma energy, and prism energy, stuff like that. Even aromatisse decks as well use lots of special energy. And once you start getting 3 or 4 special energy in your opponent's discard pile, Shadow Steel does a ridiculous amount of damage. Once you get 4 in there, you're pretty much knocking out everything. And we're going to run a couple Enhanced Hammer alongside Drifblim to really take advantage of that, so we can get those special energy into the discard pile and start using Shadow Steel as quickly as possible. So Drifblim is just another general card to counter most popular decks out there. Almost every deck nowadays does run some kind of special energy. Even this one does as well. Alright? So, I mean, the overall idea of this deck is going to be try to counter most of the popular decks. Now, there are so many popular decks that can become very difficult, but we're going to try with this deck. So we have Flareon, Leafeon, Raichu, Drifblim so far, and we have 3 Pokemon left to look at. The next one's going to be Suicune. Now, normally, safeguard Pokemon aren't really used to attack very often. They're just kind of used to sit out there and buy some time while you set up your other stuff. But in this case, we want to attack with Suicune. Why? Well, there are some particular problem Pokemon that this deck struggles to deal with quite a bit. Number 1 would be Landorus EX. Hammerhead does a number on this kind of a deck. Eevee, weak to fighting, 60 HP. Pikachu, weak to fighting, 60 HP. That is just not good. And then we don't really have anything that can damage a Landorus EX very quickly. It resists lightning, so Raichu's pretty worthless. Flareon won't do much early on. Leafeon won't do much early on. Drifblim won't do much early on. So we need something to deal with Landorus EX and also Charizard EX that can pose the same problem. Suicune is a nice answer to both. Safeguard, of course, blocks EXs from attacking it, but it's also a water type. So we can use Aurora Beam here. It takes 1 water, 2 colorless, and then using either a Muscle Band or a Silver Bangle, which we play one of each, Aurora Beam can do 90 or 100 times 2, which can knock out both Landorus EX and Charizard EX in one hit. So we have a couple Suicune here. These can also be used to buy time if we need to do that, but a very solid attacker as well against Pokemon that would otherwise give us a lot of trouble. Now our final 2 Pokemon here. First one is Druddigon. This is a pretty standard card in a lot of decks at this point. Revenge is pretty cool. Does 20 plus 70 if one of your Pokemon is knocked out by damage on your opponent's turn. This is a good response just to do 90 for 2, but also good against things that are weak to Dragon like Rayquaza EX and Black Kyurem EX. Pretty simple. We see Druddigon quite a bit. And then our last card here is Sawk, which, not a card we see very often. I really don't know if this card belongs in this deck, but we're going to try it out anyway. The first attack, Kick of Righteousness, does 10 plus 40 more if the defending Pokemon is a Team Plasma Pokemon. So this is going to be particularly good against Thundurus EX and things like Absol as well. Anything weak to fighting that's also a Team Plasma Pokemon, it's going to be... I mean, Sawk's going to be hitting it pretty hard. Now, one cool thing we have as well, we are going to run a Fighting Energy in this deck, so that in a pinch we can power up Low Sweep. It does 60 damage, it's not too great, but with a Silver Bangle, we're doing 90 damage to a Pokemon EX, so things like Darkrai EX and Thundurus EX get knocked out in one hit by Low Sweep if we have that Silver Bangle. So I'm not sure if Sawk belongs here, but hey, we're going to try him out anyway. Alright, so now we've explained all of the Pokemon here. Sorry, there are 23 of them, so quite a few for today's standards. The trainer's not nearly as complicated. We already looked at Enhanced Hammer and the damage modifiers, Silver Bangle and Muscle Band. For the supporters that just have 4 N, 3 Professor Juniper, 3 Colress, 2 Skyla, 1 Lysander, and then 2 Tropical Beach as well, since this can be kind of a slow deck sometimes. Sometimes you just kind of need to sit back and fill your hand back up. We have a lot of searching cards, 3 Level Ball, 3 Ultra Ball, just to go ahead and find the Pokemon that we need. 1 Switch and 1 Escape Rope, just to have some switching effects in the deck. And then Dowsing Machine as the Ace-Spec card, because recovering a trainer card can be very useful, especially when it's things like Silver Bangle, Muscle Band, or Enhanced Hammer. These can all be very, very good cards to bring back. And heck, even Lysander sometimes. Our energy, pretty simple. 4 double colorless, 4 water energy, and then 1 fighting energy. That's it. That's really all we need, and that's going to wrap up this deck. So let's take a look at this deck in action and see how it actually performs. It's a lot of Pokemon going on. I haven't really tried this deck out very much, but hey, maybe there's something to it. I don't know. Alright, so we have Eevee, and Pikachu. Can you ask for a cuter opening hand than that? I don't think so. And my opponent says, hello, good luck. And I'm going to say good luck right back to him. Now, first things first. Oh my goodness, Landorus EX. Not good to see when you're starting off with that Eevee. So, I'm going to Skyla for an Ultra Ball right away. And I probably think that Pikachu is going to be worthless against a deck with Landorus EX, so we're going to Ultra Ball right for the Suicune. We did have to discard a Drifblim, kind of lame, but... oh, the other Drifblim's in there, but where are the Drifloon? Oh no, both Drifloon are prized, so doesn't look like we'll be using those this game. Alright, oh well. So I am just going to attach that water energy to the Suicune and say, hey, Landorus, I am coming for you. If you want to pick on my Eevees, I am going to have my Suicune ready to Aurora Beam you and put you right in your place. So we do see a Verbank and a Hypnotoxic Laser. Still don't know what my opponent is playing beyond Landorus EX. Usually we see Garbodor and Mewtwo EX. That's a pretty standard archetype that's been around for a long time. Just Landorus, Mewtwo, Garbodor, and then maybe some other big basics in there as well. We do see an Ultra Ball, discarding a DCE and a Lysander. So those are all usual things we would see. We also see Landorus in Aromatisse deck sometimes, but with that DCE in the discard, we can probably rule that out. But we see, oh, a Litleo. Huh. And there is a Juniper as well. So this is a deck that I saw did win a national championship. It was a Landorus Mewtwo Pyroar deck. So maybe that is what we're going up against here. This will be interesting. But here you can see why we need to run Suicune in this deck. Eevee just got destroyed by that Hammerhead turn 1, and we would have no response to that otherwise. So I'm going to Chorus for 4, trying to hit that DCE so I can Aurora Beam. But it looks like we got a whole lot of nothing from that. And I'm going to go ahead and level ball here. I can take either an Eevee or a Pikachu. I think I might do Pikachu. Just, you know, to give myself a free retreating option with a Raichu if I ever want to get that into play. So we'll go ahead and level ball for the Pikachu. And man, that was a big missed opportunity. If I could have gotten the double colorless, we could have used, you know, Aurora Beam, gotten the knockout, and everything would have been beautiful. But that is just not the case right now. So we're going to have to pass and see what happens from here. We do see the DCE going on to the Litleo on the bench. And, you know, Hammerhead can't hurt Suicune, but it can hit the Pikachu or the Eevee on the bench, so that is something I have to be wary of. Just going to have to see what happens here. And I don't know. Which one will my opponent go for? Both are kind of interesting. I might think they would go for Eevee, since Flareon is a little more difficult to knock out. Then again, going after Raichu isn't always a bad idea. Another Landorus later could finish it off with another Hammerhead. If it has 30 on it already, a 60 damage Hammerhead could finish it off, so there's always that. We do see an Ultra Ball for a Pyroar. I'm not sure how useful Pyroar will actually be against my deck. I mean, I don't really have anything right now that can deal with it, but eventually Flareon, Raichu, and even Drifblim can all deal with the Pyroar threat. Alright, so we do see another Lysander taking out my Pikachu and going after the Eevee as well, but alright, fortunate enough to top deck that double colorless energy. Now instead of using Juniper, I can just probably go ahead and Skyla here for something useful. You know, just take advantage of my position and try to milk my supporters for all they're worth. And here, you know, an Enhanced Hammer would actually be a pretty good card to take. Right, we can go ahead and Skyla for the Enhanced Hammer and prevent my opponent from really attacking on the following turn. So let's just go ahead and do that. And Aurora Beam for 200 damage, taking down that big bad Landorus EX. Okay, so now we see Pyroar coming up with a Muscle Band, and there's a Professor Juniper. Discarding, looks like a Fighting Energy. My opponent intelligently did not bench another Landorus EX, knowing that Suicune full well could Aurora Beam at any point. But this is going to be probably a pass for my opponent on this turn, since there's not much he could do in terms of offense. 'Cause, you know, anything that he could put down that would hurt Suicune would probably be an EX. Only other thing I could think of is Druddigon perhaps could have messed with Suicune there, but nope, we just see a Hypnotoxic Laser and then a Rainbow Energy going on to the Pyroar. That's actually huge because I got my other Enhanced Hammer out of the prizes, so we can go ahead and just Enhanced Hammer that other special energy and set my opponent back a little bit more. You can see how powerful Enhanced Hammer is in this kind of a situation. Alright, so I got a level ball. I'm going to go with the Pikachu in this instance. I also have a Leafeon, and I don't feel like that's worth evolving into, though. I kind of want to just get a Flareon instead, so I may just hold on to the Leafeon and try to draw a Flareon. But This is kind of a bummer of a turn. You know, Suicune stayed asleep, poisoned, and yikes, I mean, I just couldn't draw a Tropical Beach either to kind of dull the pain of the hypnotoxic laser, but I guess we'll see what happens from here. Alright, so we are tied in prizes. I'm going to probably be behind in prizes for a little bit, but can I take my remaining 4? That's going to be the big question here. We see a computer surge from my opponent, and I'm really just not sure what to expect at this point, but one of the things I do have going for me is that my opponent has a lot of special energy in the discard pile. So Shadow Steel Drifblim is going to be a major player in the closing moments of this game. We did have to discard the one Drifblim early on, but later it could come up pretty big. So we'll have to see about that. We saw a Super Rod shuffling in Landorus and 2 Fighting Energy. So it looks like my opponent wants to get that back. And, you know, I don't really care if Landorus comes back. That's just another easy Aurora Beam knockout, right? We'll just go ahead and Aurora Beam, another Landorus if that comes into play. I do get the Raichu, and I will be able to Circle Circuit that Pyroar this turn. We'll go ahead and attach another double colorless to the benched Eevee, just preparing for a Flareon to come out. And alright, let's end my opponent down to 4 cards. And just go ahead with, get the Flareon into play. Just have another attacker ready in case that Pyroar over there does indeed knock out my Raichu. I will have a response then with Flareon. So I'm winning the game right now, up by a prize. And my opponent down to 4 cards, so things are looking pretty good, I would say. We do see a Float Stone onto the Keldeo EX. And we'll have to see what my opponent can do this turn. Now, if we did see, let's see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4 Pokemon in the discard pile. I would have 6 if Raichu got knocked out. Well, that's actually not good. I would actually be in trouble. I wouldn't be able to knock out Pyroar with Flareon this turn. But, oh wow. Oh, I didn't even realize this could happen. There's a Landorus EX with a Muscle Band coming out and using Hammerhead on my poor Eevee. And on my Raichu, that's a double knockout, and you can see just how vulnerable this deck really is against that darn Landorus EX. So this is bad, bad news. But if I can draw a DCE here, this will be an easy Aurora Beam knockout once again. But, man, nothing, just not going my way right now. Boy, I'm really not sure what to do here. So I do have an Ultra Ball. We can go ahead and discard 2 Pokemon to power up Flareon's Vengeance. Now I'm kicking myself not evolving that Eevee into Leafeon before that one prize could end up really losing me the game. But I'm going to Ultra Ball for the Drifblim, since I do feel like that will be, again, a major player as the game does progress. But nothing I can do here but pass the turn. And that is very unfortunate at this juncture because my opponent's down to 2 prizes. I have a Suicune active with 10 HP left. Oh man, that was a big miss there. I don't have any switching cards, otherwise I might switch into Flareon and try to hit that Landorus for a little bit of damage with the Vengeance. But no, looks like gonna be a pass. Ouch. Alright, there's a startling Megaphone from my opponent, probably just playing that to get rid of it. Also could prevent Suicune from knocking out Landorus next turn if my opponent decides to Hammerhead and get a knockout that way. And, boy, I mean, this is going to be a rough game to finish out now. That one Hammerhead really set me back quite a bit, and you can just see you can't give Landorus EX any free turns when you're using this deck, just because there's so many weak 60 HP basics that are also weak to fighting. I mean, that's just not pretty. Alright. So we do see, a Fire Energy going on to the Pyroar. We could see a Rush In and Retreat. And then attack with a Pyroar to knock out my Suicune. That is a possibility, I suppose. And then my opponent would go down to 1 prize, but then we can knock out the Pyro pretty easily. We have enough Pokemon at this point to use Vengeance, and you know, we could even use Shadow Steel with Drifblim if need be. There's a Mewtwo EX coming down. There is the Rush In, the Retreat into Pyroar, and the Scorching Fang. Uh-oh. Okay, so my opponent is down to 1 prize at this point. That's okay, though. My opponent would need quite a bit to actually knock me out next turn, so I'm not too worried, but we do need to do something here. We need to start just taking knockouts the rest of the game, basically. Alright, so let's see. My preferred route here would be to end my opponent down to 1 card. That just seems like the best move here. Just take away as many options as I possibly can from an opponent who's probably used a lot of resources at this point. So I'm going to put that Water Energy onto the Drifblim just to prepare for a Shadow Steel. We could definitely do that. I maybe should have promoted Drifblim since it's probably the better attacker here. Less energy makes it less vulnerable to Mewtwo's X-Ball. It's weak to Darkness, not Psychic, so Mewtwo can't really knock it out. And we're going to Dowsing Machine here for the end, discarding the Muscle Band and the Druddigon. We're going to keep the Juniper just so we can have higher odds of drawing it in this kind of a situation. And alright, can go for a Vengeance, but, oh man, if Mewtwo EX got a DCE and a Muscle Band, or a double Colorless and a Laser, it could actually knock out Flareon. I mean, my opponent only has 1 card, but I want to make it as difficult as possible for my opponent to possibly win here. So I think I may go for the switch into Drifblim at this point and just Shadow Steel, because it is way more difficult to knock out Drifblim. And this makes it so if my opponent wants to use any of those Pokemon EX, it's game over, because Shadow Steel, it did 150 to knock out that Pyroar, but now there's a 4th special energy in the discard pile, and Shadow Steel will now do 200 damage. So I guess we got that going for me. We see the Rainbow going on to Landorus EX, so that's going to threaten a Land's Judgment if my opponent does top deck any energy at this point. That's a Land's Judgment for the game, so I need to hit my Escape Rope here. I did not find my Lysander, so I'm going to throw it on the Tropical Beach and try to hit the Escape Rope, and there it is. All of my opponent's Pokemon on the bench are Pokemon EX, and I can knock out any of them with Shadow Steel. So that's some simple math here. 2 prize knockout, 2 prizes remaining, and there it is. Shadow Steel, 200 damage, and Drifblim steals the game. Bad pun for the win. Alright, so this deck is actually quite a bit of fun. Flareon, Leafeon, Raichu, Drifblim, Suicune, Druddigon, Sawk, anything else you can think of. And there are also tons of options you could throw into this deck as well, which makes it pretty cool. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will certainly have some more for you soon. I am Pooka from the Top Cut, and I will see you guys next time.